Om Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Aditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and namaste. Welcome to our Saturday afternoon reading and discussion of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, as offered to us in a workbook titled How to Know God, which is the interpretation and commentary of Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood. We're well along in chapter 3. Jeff, our noble and wonderful reader, will tell us where we are. And but before we begin, is there anything left over from our previous readings and discussions that is worthy of a comment or raises a concern or a question for you? Anything at all from what we read before that leaves a question mark or concern or is reason for you to comment from your own wisdom or experience? All right, I'm glad there's clarity about what we've read so far. Jeff, where are we?
Brother, I wish I knew. Yeah, I missed the last class.
Okay, Balakrishna, where are we?
I need some help.
Well, okay, we were reading, I think, in the power section, but we decided to go back to the first chapter to read the 50 and 49. We read 49, but we did not read 50 in the chapter 1. So that's where we left.
Okay, please read the one that you read previously, that 49. Read that over and then read 15. Jeff, did you get what he was talking about?
Yes, sir. And so in the book that most of us have, that would be on page 171. It's chapter 1, Yoga and its Practice. So Sutra 49 is, after mastering posture, one must practice control of the prana, pranayama, by stopping the motions of inhalation and exhalation. And then number 50, the breath may be stopped.
No, was it 50 or 15? 1-5.
Oh,
No, 50. 50.
Oh, 50. It was 49 and 50. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Number 50, the breath may be stopped externally or internally, or checked in mid-motion and regulated according to place, time, and a fixed number of moments, so that the stoppage is either protracted or brief. Now, do we want to cover the commentary this morning? It's rather lengthy.
Yes.
Well, is there any question?
We've actually covered all that commentary twice. This would be the third time.
Well, that was my recollection, that we at least covered.
So we actually should be starting off on number 9 in chapter 3.
Well, be patient, Glenn.
Okay, I'm just saying,
Not everybody is on the same page with you, so to speak.
I agree with Glenn though that this will be the third time that
Yeah,
we've
well,
gone.
but I want to know, is there any concern or question that anyone has about 49 or 50? Okay. Let me just say, pranayama is something that the Ramakrishna order swamis and nuns tell us comes naturally with your spiritual practice. You don't need to do this deliberate control of the breath, that as you begin to practice mantra or visualization, the breath naturally slows and ultimately stops. And so this is the instruction of the Ramakrishna order swamis. They don't say don't do it, but they do tell you, if you're going to do it under the guidance of a totally qualified instructor. So let's go on then to chapter 3. Sutra, I believe the mention was number 9.
Well, I have something.
Yes, please.
If you read Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, he has
Yes.
he has detailed instructions on this procedure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that
Yes,
will.
but he also says to do it only under the guidance of a qualified teacher.
Yes, that's the detailed instruction. That's part of
Right.
detailed instruction.
Indeed. It isn't, as I say, it isn't that the Ramakrishna order swamis tell you not to do this. They just say there is danger. And if you don't know what you're doing, you can damage your nervous system, your brain. You can give yourself a stroke or promote other kinds of illness. And so they say do it only under a qualified instructor. Thank you, Robert. Yes, Swami Vivekananda, as always, is very thorough. Anything else before we move on? Okay, Glenn. Jeff, proceed.
Okay, the next 4 sutras are grouped together, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And I think if you add them all up, they're almost as long as the commentary that follows. In other words, there's not much commentary. So Sutra number 9, when the vision of the lower samadhi is suppressed by an act of conscious control, so that there are no longer any thoughts or visions in the mind, that is the achievement of control of the thought waves of the mind. I'll read number 9 again. When the vision of the lower samadhi is suppressed by an act of conscious control, so that there are no longer any thoughts or visions in the mind, that is the achievement of control of the thought waves of the mind. Sutra 10. When this suppression of thought waves becomes continuous, the mind's flow is calm. And number 10 again, when this suppression of thought waves becomes continuous, the mind's flow is calm. Number 11, when all mental distractions disappear and the mind becomes one-pointed, it enters the state called samadhi. And repeating Sutra 11, when the mental distractions disappear and the mind becomes one-pointed, it enters the state called samadhi. And Sutra 12. The mind becomes one-pointed when similar thought waves arise in succession without any gaps between them. And repeating, the mind becomes one-pointed when similar thought waves arise in succession without any gaps between them. And the commentary. It has been said that if the mind can be made to flow uninterruptedly toward the same object for 12 seconds, This may be called concentration. If the mind can continue in that concentration for 12 times 12 seconds, that is 2 minutes and 24 seconds, this may be called meditation. If the mind can continue in that meditation for 12 times 2 minutes and 24 seconds, which would be 28 minutes and 48 seconds, this will be the lower samadhi. And if the lower samadhi can be maintained for 12 times that period, which would be 5 hours, 45 minutes, and 36 seconds, this will lead to nirvikalpa samadhi. That concludes the commentary.
All right. Now, so we hear what Patanjali has said. We hear what Swami Prabhupada has said about it. So lest any of us have any sense that this is an easy thing to do, this is a very clear description, a very scientific description, according to the numbers of concentration, meditation, savikalpa samadhi, and nirvikalpa samadhi. So any comments, concerns, or questions from anyone?
Well, I'll go ahead and go. I'm still working on the 12 seconds, and maybe sometimes I can get up to 24 seconds. But what is really helping me is the metaphor. I think it was from Sri Ramakrishna. The metaphor is concentration is like pouring oil from one vessel into another. That picture in my mind really helps me to maintain my concentration, and I'm looking forward to 36 seconds sometime soon.
Well, good for you. It's early days with your mantra. You were only recently initiated. This visualization of pouring oil from one vessel to another, of course, Sri Ramakrishna did quote it. It's Upanishadic. It goes back to one of the Upanishads, I don't remember which, and is very traditional. Also, the image of a candle burning in a windless place so that it does not flicker. This is, again, a traditional definition of concentration flowing into meditation. So thank you, Jeff. Anything else from anyone?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Sutra number 2, which is the cessation of vrittis or chitta vritti nirodha, which means we're stopping any flow of thought in some ways. So how would that translate into the first stage here of uninterrupted flow, 12 seconds towards the concentration object, which may be Sampragnata Samadhi, and then how do we move to Nirvikalpa Samadhi? And is Nirvikalpa Samadhi and Kaivalya the same thing as Sutra number 2, which is Chitta Vritti Nirodha, meaning cessation of all mind thoughts? So I'm just trying to.
Yes, that Chitta Vritti Nirodha is the definition of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. How to achieve Nirvikalpa Samadhi? It cannot be done by an act of will. This ability to sustain meditation for 5 hours and something, or I'm sorry, the length of time that was mentioned, I've forgotten the numbers now, whatever that number is. I think it's 5 hours and something. This is said by Patanjali and by the sages of the Upanishads and by Sri Ramakrishna to be something that is not within the control of the will. It is something that is granted by the divine presence. However you think about this, Sri Ramakrishna spoke of it as Divine Mother, Holy Mother, not Holy Mother, Divine Mother, Kali. that she holds the key. And when she turns the key in the lock and opens the door and holds it open with her foot, then we go through. But until, and Patanjali himself says that the first 6 steps or first 6 of limbs of yoga are something that you do by self-effort, Purushakara. The next 2, samadhi and liberation, absorption and liberation or kaivalya, independence of all conditions and limitations, is something that happens to you. He doesn't point to a personality controlling it, but just that it's something that happens to you. This is also said in the Upanishads, that by those who have achieved it and come back and written an Upanishad, they say, it wasn't something I did, it was something that happened to me. So I hope that answers your question as best we can, Bhaskar. Those who have been in the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, of course, there is no mind there, so there's no reporter of what happens or why it happens. It simply happens. But we apparently have to prepare ourselves for it. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you for, I think you've said this a number of times, but it seems like I need to go and hear that again, just to make sure that
it is a very difficult concept for us to grasp because we are completely unable to imagine being without limitations and conditions. All of our languaging and thinking goes on in the left brain, which is a creature of limitations and conditions. And so it is not able to imagine what it would be like to be without that. It's completely beyond its grasp. Thank you, Bhaskar, as always. Anything else from anyone? All right, Jeff, please read on.
Sutra 13. In this state, it passes beyond the 3 kinds of changes which take place in subtle or gross matter and in the organs, those being change of form, change of time, and change of condition. Repeating Sutra 13. In this state, it passes beyond the 3 kinds of changes which take place in subtle or gross matter and in the organs, change of form, change of time, and change of condition. Vivekananda takes as an example a lump of gold. Change of form occurs when the gold is made first into a bracelet and then into an earring. Change of time occurs as it gets older. Change of condition occurs when the bright gold becomes dull or wears thin. Similar changes occur in subtle matter and in the thought waves of the mind. The thought waves may be of different kinds, may refer to different periods of time, and may vary in intensity, but the mind in the state of samadhi is beyond all 3 kinds of changes. And that concludes the commentary.
Okay, any comment or question about that? Because once again, I said, the Swami describes this to us, but we really can't imagine what it is like to be beyond those 3 states of change.
And I'm just trying to probably split hairs here, but on the top 1 line explanation by Prabhavananda, he talks about 3 changes: change in form, change in time, and change in condition. When I'm reading below what Vivekananda is saying, I can see change in form very clearly. I can see change in time kind of wrapped as a subset of change in condition, but I'm also trying to read through the fact that what is happening to the thought waves. And the nature of the thought waves changing, is that some kind of a transformation in character? So I'm seeing transformation in property, I'm seeing transformation in condition, and I see time as part of the condition. But is there an overall transformation of character that's being talked about? And character meaning the different nature of vrittis. That's
Yes, exactly. That's precisely what happens. Swami Swahananda said the only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. Because your thought waves have changed, you have now replaced lower samadhis with higher samadhi. I mean, not samadhis. Not, you replace lower samskaras with higher samskaras. This results in a different form of speech, and therefore, a different form of thought, which results in a different form of speech, which results in a different form of behavior. And so it is definitely has to do with transformation of character. This again is something that as Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga, he speaks about in some detail. The collection of talks collected about as Karma Yoga. It wasn't a book he wrote.
thank you.
Anything else from anyone? All right, this is what it means to study the art of spirituality together. We now have a pretty good grasp of what it is that's meant by these powers that come to us if we continue to practice meditation. And by the by, every one of the great teachers say, by my grace, I can accelerate this process for you. So it doesn't need to take lifetimes. It can be done in this lifetime, not by our self-effort, but by the grace of the divine being, acting as our mother and father. Anything else from anyone before Jeff reads on? Okay, please read on, Jeff.
The next two sutras are grouped together. Sutra 14, a compound object has attributes and is subject to change, either past, present, or yet to be manifested. And repeating 14, a compound object has attributes and is subject to change, either past, present, or yet to be manifested. In Sutra 15, the succession of these changes is the cause of manifold evolution. The succession of these changes is the cause of manifold evolution. And the commentary, every object within the realm of differentiated matter has attributes and is a compound object, since it is made of the three gunas in varying combinations. As has already been explained in Chapter 1, the attributes of an object vary and change according to the action of the gunas and the constitution of the samskaras. Any object can change into any other object. Therefore, the enlightened yogi sees no essential difference between a piece of gold and a lump of mud. Hence, he acquires complete dispassion toward the objects of the phenomenal world. That concludes the commentary.
And now we have some grasp of why it is that a truly dedicated and practicing Raja Yogi lives apart from the world. They are working toward this condition of being indifferent toward the things of the world. So they do this progressively, using the yamas and niyamas as their foundation. They slowly move away when we are in the habit of pratyahara, that is, not paying attention to the senses, either the gross senses or the subtle senses. their immediate stimulation or the memory of their previous stimulation or the thoughts of future stimulation, then something very profound happens. And this is one of the things that happens because they're not at all concerned about the things of the senses and what can bring them pleasure from things of the senses. A lump of gold or a piece of gold is of no more significance to them than a lump of mud. The gold has no attraction because they don't want anything that the gold can buy. They primarily, these people, these women and men who are living as Raja Yogis, they live on alms. They do not have any kind of employment and earn money and buy things. They either live as monastics or they live on alms. And so this is why Patanjali can say what he said and why Swami Prabhavananda can comment as he did. Any concern, any comment, any question from any of you?
I have one thought, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
If you look at a piece of gold or a lump of mud from the point of view of physics, yes, there are differences, that a physicist would be happy to explain to you.
Can't talk now, I'm in class. Can't talk now, I'm in class. Please hang up.
But ultimately, they're all made of energy. Everything in this physical world is different patterns of energy, and a lot of it is empty space. So if you look at it that way, that would agree with the enlightened yogi who sees no essential difference between them. And it's us and our social conditioning that recognizes gold as a pattern that's much more valuable than mud. But that's materialism.
Yes, exactly. Precisely all of that. Thank you, Jeff. Anything else from anyone? All right, well, let's read on then.
Sutra number 16. By making samyama on the three kinds of changes, one obtains knowledge of the past and future. Repeating Sutra 16. By making samyama on the three kinds of changes, one obtains knowledge of the past and the future. Patanjali now begins to describe the various occult powers and the methods by which they are acquired. All authorities, including Patanjali himself, regard occult powers as the greatest stumbling blocks in the path to truth. Heaps of rubbish, Sri Ramakrishna calls them. Buddha told his disciples very definitely never to put their faith in miracles, but to see truth in the eternal principles. Christ spoke sharply against those who seek for a sign. And it is unfortunate that his strictures were not taken more seriously to heart by his followers. Occult powers do, however, exist, and Patanjali, in his comprehensive treatise on yoga psychology, obviously cannot ignore them. We translate the aphorisms which follow for the sake of completeness, but we do so with a minimum of technical explanation. The sincere spiritual aspirant can have very little concern with such matters. In the West, these powers are seldom exhibited and are therefore the object of a good deal of skepticism. Yet they are all within each one of us and could be developed through constant practice. Western man has made a different choice. He has preferred to concentrate on the production of mechanical rather than psychological powers. And so instead of telepathy, we have the telephone. Instead of levitation, we have the helicopter. and instead of clairvoyance, we have television. We may regret the materialism that is expressed by such a choice, but perhaps it is the lesser of two evils. A community of degenerated yogis using psychic powers for business and political ends would be even more unpleasant to live in than our own atom-wielding world. So let us stop hankering after the psychic powers and turn back to the true path toward spiritual growth, remembering Patanjali's warning. They are powers in the worldly state, but they are obstacles to samadhi. That concludes the commentary.
Yes, and if you want to know what is meant by a community of degenerated yogis, study the Toltecs and the Aztecs at the time that the Spanish came and conquered what we now call Mexico. They were practicing the most gruesome kinds of practices to sustain and increase their power. As Don Juan Matus said in his teachings, they had gone completely off the rails. They had gotten lost in the pursuit of power and its demonstration, and were doing everything to seek that power. It was truly gruesome, truly horrible. So we don't need to worry too much about this in today's world, because there are not many, if any at all, who are willing to do what is necessary, the years and years of practice, to become skilled enough to use these powers for their own purposes. But as Swami Prabhavananda points out, and Swami Vivekananda points out even more fully in his Raja Yoga book, that Patanjali does this in the spirit of science. He cannot, as Swami Prabhavananda said, ignore these, so he enumerates them and gives some explanation. And the Swami does not make much in the way of, he said, technical explanation or commentary, but we'll go through them. If you want to understand the dangers that these can present, read chapter 4, particularly toward the end of Swami Vivekananda's book, Raja Yoga. He talks about the terrible temptation of omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence, which is the fulfillment of the totality of these powers. And he says this is the final temptation for the yogi to set aside the temptations of being omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, and become kaivalya, independent of even those conditions, even those limitations, because they are indeed limitations. They are something within time, space, and causation. That which is without limitation is beyond time, space, and causation, beyond the gunas. So anything else from anyone before we read on?
So just a quick observation that Sutra number 16 is very adequately telling us not to worry about these special powers or vibhutis, but yet chapter 3 is named Vibhuti Pada, and it's the entire chapter. So just so
Yes.
amused by it.
Well, it's done for the sake, it simply can't be ignored by Patanjali, because he doesn't want you to go down this path, encounter these things, and not have something in his workbook that tells you what it is, why it is, and because you can stumble on these things by accident. As Swami Prabhavananda said, that almost all of us who practiced the mantra that he gave us would encounter one of these powers at some point. And his instruction was, use it once. Use it once, no matter which of the powers it is. Use it once, because otherwise you'll be ever curious about what it would be. Use it once and then renounce it. And so it's good that Patanjali and the other teachers explain these things to us, because otherwise we wouldn't know what to think. Our left mind doesn't know what to think of things like this. This is why there's so much skepticism. Thank you, Bhaskar. Anything else from anyone?
It seems to me that these must be like back in Sutra 9, where it says to suppress by an act of conscious control, talking about the thoughts and lower samadhis, because it seems like to me if they had hit Savikalpa Samadhi, that it would solve that problem of wanting to do those things. I don't see how somebody could have God realization and then go to using occult powers for harm.
That's a very good observation, Glenn. Nevertheless, people have done it. Aleister Crowley is an example.
But it seemed like they'd have to almost be a different kind of a being to me to be able to have God realization and then go to do.
Well, that's a good surmise. Very difficult for us to prove one way or the other. Aleister Crowley definitely was an extraordinary individual, but he both had God realization and he became corrupt. There have been others. Anything else from anyone before we read on? Okay.
Sutra 17. By making samyama on the sound of a word, one's perception of its meaning and one's reaction to it, three things which are ordinarily confused, one obtains understanding of all sounds uttered by living beings. I'll repeat that as best I can. The punctuation makes it a little confusing. By making samyama on the sound of a word, one's perception of its meaning and one's reaction to it, three things which are ordinarily confused, one obtains understanding of all sounds uttered by living beings.
So St. Francis of Assisi can speak to squirrels. He's not deliberately developed this psychic power. It came from meditation on the name of Christ. And so the same kinds of what seem to us or told to us as miraculous powers, they're not miraculous powers of Christ at all. They're just the natural expression of being the great yogi that he was. So when one of these saints, which means by definition becoming like that which promoted their sainthood, gave them their sainthood by meditation on that great teacher. So St. Francis of Assisi could speak to the squirrels and understood the language of birds. Swami Vivekananda was once in South India, and he was in the presence of some Brahmin priests who were chanting some Sanskrit mantras that they had no idea what they were. They had no idea what the meaning or significance of these words. They knew when and how to chant them, but they didn't know why. And so they asked Vivekananda, can you solve this puzzle for us? And he listened to the mantras that they were chanting, took this into meditation, returned to the Brahmins and said, "This is the songs of birds." This is the songs of birds announcing the times of day, morning, and evening, and so on. And so he explained this to them. And so he understood what they were saying in that way. So we can do exactly what Patanjali says. Again, it's if you deliberately seek this power, you're probably headed in the wrong direction. Anything else from anyone? Okay, please.
The commentary. Ordinarily, we are aware of no distinction between hearing the sound of a word, understanding what it means, and reacting in one way or another to the information it contains. If someone shouts fire, we jump to our feet in an instant. But the yogi is able to separate these three functions. By making this samyama, he can understand foreign languages and the sounds made by all kinds of animals. That concludes the commentary.
Mm-hmm. Gurdjieff could understand any language. Listening to it for just a little while, he could understand and then speak any language. This was a power that was manifested by the teacher Gurdjieff. So this is not, again, something extraordinary. It's just, it's extraordinary in the sense of it would take a not ordinary being to get to the point of manifesting it, but there's nothing mysterious about it. That's what I mean. Any other comment or question?
So it almost seems like this is an conditioned reflex. You hear a sound, it means something, and you react to it, like the fire thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to go back to the little story that he talked about, the Brahmins chanting the mantra, all I could probably come up with in the, the monastery in Italy, the abbots chanting something. The chanting, they're hearing it. Is there something that is a common thread to be understood from this sutra and the chanting and the mantras? Or
Well, the chanting of the mantra produces an effect that is completely unexpected. But the chanting of the mantra, at least a proper mantra, by proper I mean one that will lead you in the right direction, an auspicious mantra, they are given to us by people who know what mantra to give you. And usually that comes down through apostolic succession from one of the great teachers. In the case of the Ramakrishna order monks, it comes directly from Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Vivekananda. And so they pass along these mantras, knowing that their effect will be to allow us to experience the living presence of the divine within us. That is to say, to experience the Atman, the living presence that gives us life. That is the reason, as Vivekananda writes of Sri Ramakrishna, speech cannot hold thee nor mind. What that is contained in the mantra. Speech cannot hold thee nor mind, yet without thee we think not nor speak. So we don't have we don't come to an intellectual understanding of what it is that's in the mantra, although we may come into an intellectual understanding of the parts of the mantra and so on. And that doesn't really signify very much. But we will come to a much more profound understanding if we repeat it for years of its inner meaning, its meaning, and its ability to reveal to us the truth of our inner being. So that's mantra, as it's understood from here.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Brother Saka, I would say that psychic powers are no different than physical powers or mental powers. It's how they're used. I mean, we can go out physically and do things that are incorrect, or we can think things that are incorrect. And I think that the psychic powers would be no different from that. And I'd like to know what you have to say about that.
Perfect. You're absolutely right, Robert. But the thing that the Swamis warn us about is don't get very attached to any of those kinds of powers, because those powers are just things of time, space, and causation. They're necessary. You have to be able to do what you described, and it's only a matter of degree. How auspicious is it to become a bodybuilder to the point where you're able to participate in competitions on bodybuilding? It may be an interesting thing to do, but in the long run, it's just a waste of time. Waste of your precious time as a human being. Now, we don't judge it. It's not up to us to judge whether other people are wasting their time or not. It's none of our business. But, we can say for myself, it would certainly be a waste of time. And this is true of any other immoderate behavior. This is why all of the great teachers warn against immoderation, and why Patanjali specifically mentions it in the yamas. That makes sense, Robert?
Yes, yes. And the reason I brought it up is because that's all we have to do here. We have to exercise our physical powers, our mental powers, and those of us who have developed psychic powers. I mean, if they're available to you and you see a situation or a condition where you can help or contribute to the situation by the use of it, yes, and I agree 100%. You should not get attached to any of it.
Thank you.
Actually, I was thinking about it is when I said they're a different kind of being, what it is I believe it's intensifying their desire for the ephemeral world and the pleasures of the body, whereas other people, their desires lie in the God realization.
Yes, precisely. And if you want to get the full explanation of this in all of its ramifications, read chapter 17 of the Gita. Sri Krishna speaks about divine and demonic tendencies and the spectrum that exists between the one on the right, the divine, and the one on the left, the demonic. This spectrum of all that you just mentioned. So yes, it's there. And the more you're drawn in the direction of your divine tendencies, the happier and more free you will be. Less entanglements, which is exactly what Patanjali, to return to this study of Raja Yoga, is exactly what he suggests and very clearly teaches in the niyamas, the observances. They lead us in that direction. Thank you, Glenn. Anyone else? Anything? Okay, how are we doing for time?
We've got about 9 minutes on the official
Good.
clock,
Please go right ahead.
and we have several short sutras and commentaries, so we can
Okay.
see how far we get. Sutra 18. By making samyama on previous thought waves, one obtains knowledge of one's past lives. Repeating number 18. By making samyama on previous thought waves, one obtains knowledge of one's past lives. When a thought wave subsides, it remains within the mind in a minute, subtle form. Therefore, it can be revived as memory, and this memory can be made to extend backward into previous incarnations. And that concludes that commentary.
Anything else from anyone about the advisability or inadvisability of that?
I would say it's kind of pointless to try to go into past lives.
Indeed it is. This one is confusing enough. That's the opinion from here. Anything else from anyone? Okay, onward.
Sutra 19. By making samyama on the distinguishing marks of another man's body, one obtains the knowledge of the nature of his mind. Oh, I just realized 19 and 20 are grouped together. So number 20 is, but not of its contents, because that is not the object of the samyama. So repeating 19, by making samyama on the distinguishing marks of another man's body, one obtains knowledge of the nature of his mind. And 20, but not of its contents, because that is not the object of the samyama. And
Notice how specific these concentration and meditation episodes are. That's the definition of samyama, concentration and meditation together, concentration on some particular thing, in other words, meditating on some particular thing through concentrating on it. Sri Ramakrishna could immediately tell by the marks, as it's said here, on another person's body, the nature of that person's mind. And it was one of the ways that he discriminated between those people with whom he would spend serious time in spiritual instruction, and those to whom he would recommend that they go visit the temple gardens. He would know immediately whether they would be able to benefit by time with him or not. And he had no desire to spend time or attempt to teach people who were not teachable. His time was precious. He knew how long he was going to live. And so he did not wish to spend time with people that couldn't benefit by his being and presence. And so he would spend time with some people by seeing who and how they were, by the marks on their body. It wasn't that he was reading their minds. He could just tell the nature of their mind. What was it that they were expressing through their mind and body and so on? Any comments or questions about that?
Actually, going back to what we learned about Patanjali's use of numerology, until 19, we were talking of various aspects coming out of samyama that may not be important. But in 20, he kind of switches the language and says, but not its content, because this is not the objective. So maybe 20 onwards, things around samyama will be brought about, which is probably useful in some nature.
Well, we'll see.
This is just anecdotal, but this is my own thinking that I've had for a long time, is that the way we perceive people visually is partially or completely due to how we perceive that person on the level that Sri Ramakrishna is talking about, that because we don't actually see, everything we see is a projection in the mind, and that mind in your mind has filters on the senses. And I think we're perceiving more than just a visual representation of that person. I think what we see in our mind is influenced by that perception that Sri Ramakrishna is talking about.
This is why it's called a psychic power. Glenn, you're absolutely right.
And so
it's not an ordinary mental or visual or sensual power.
So I can see persons or things, and I can pretty much already know whether or not I'm going to like them or not.
If you say so, we can celebrate that.
But I'm just saying that's a long held belief of myself just through observation, but it's just anecdotal.
Okay. Well, all of what we say, isn't it, is anecdotal. We very few of us, if any of us here, including this, are capable of speaking the supreme truth, except as a quote. So, if there's time left, please read on, Jeff.
Well, there's a brief commentary, but it doesn't really comment on those two sutras. It's a promo or a future sutra. In order to know the contents of another's mind, the yogi would have to make a second samyama on the heart. And he refers to Sutra 35 later on in this chapter.
Yes, exactly.
And then what follows is 21 and 22, and it would probably be a good stopping point if we go ahead and cover those two. And
yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Number 21, if one makes samyama on the form of one's body, obstructing its perceptibility and separating its power of manifestation from the eyes of the beholder, then one's body becomes invisible. And there's so much going on there, let me repeat that one. If one makes samyama on the form of one's body, obstructing its perceptibility and separating its power of manifestation from the eyes of the beholder, then one's body becomes invisible. Number 22, thus also its sounds cease to be heard. Thus also its sounds cease to be heard. In other words, it is possible for the yogi, while remaining present in a room, to obstruct the outward manifestation of his body in such a way that the senses of other people will be unable to detect it. The reality behind the outward manifestation will remain, but since this reality cannot be detected by the gross sense organs of others, the yogi will become unseen, unheard, unfelt, and so on. And that concludes the commentary.
Okay, Swami Prabhavananda tells a story of actually knowing such a person, that they had developed this psychic power to the point where they once rode a railroad train with him without buying a ticket. They They were able to obtain everything they wanted by becoming invisible and just taking it, including this this ride on the train from I don't know, wherever it was, Calcutta to Hardwar or something. Swami Prabhupada said this man later went totally and irretrievably insane because he had damaged his nervous system to such a degree by practicing this this power. He hadn't done what was necessary. Anyway, that's Swami Prabhupananda's story. You can read it in the book A Light to the West. It's a book about Swami Prabhupananda, mostly his own anecdotes, if you will. All right, well, we'll leave it there. We'll pick it up there next week. Any final thought or comment or concern from anyone?
Yes, I have one. Maybe, well, I guess, well, now Ramakrishna was a special person, and he was able to see inside of a person's personality of being by the marks on their bodies and things. But from my experience, it's a great mistake for us as regular human beings to judge people by anything other than one-on-one experience with that person.
You're absolutely right, Robert. You're absolutely right. Sri Ramakrishna was, if we understand and believe it, an avatar. And he wasn't judging these people. He wasn't saying, this person is good, this person is bad. He was simply saying, this person can benefit by my attention, this person cannot.
Yes.
So,
yeah, but my emphasis wasn't to Ramakrishna, it was to us.
yes.
When we attempt to do that, we err.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Actions are what we have to relate to. We live in a world of action. This is a world of action. The more we try to depend on thoughts or imaginations or psychic powers rather than the interaction with others, we are prone to error, as you pointed out. Very well said. Of course, there's never any perfect definition of anything, one rule that applies everywhere to everyone at all times. So, so we just do the best we can to be as appropriate as we can in every moment. Okay. Any final thought from anyone about any of what we've read or anything else that's of concern? All right, dears. Tomorrow morning, the talk is the first of the talks on Jnana Yoga. And the title is, What Are You Thinking? What are you thinking? And of course, that will be explained what's meant by that question. So until tomorrow morning, for those of you who decide to join us, and we'll make announcements at that time about some other important things. But you can find those announcements also in the newsletter and on the website. So if you don't choose to come in the morning, fare thee well. Talk with you later, and let us be on our way. And away